My first advice is don't. Do something else. Get yourself a proper job. Do not go for music. However, if you are absolutely brutally convicted, then go for it. Otherwise, don't bother, because it will take all of your energy, all of the time to make it. So if you can do it halfway and piecemeal, do something else.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Chat with Nick. And oh my gosh, I am so excited because we have the chart-topping record producer, singer, songwriter, Phil Fearon in the house. Oh my gosh.
I'm in the house. I love it.
How are you today?
I am very well, thank you. I'm being well looked after. It's my first time in these parts for many years, and I'm with a good bunch of people, so I'm very happy.
What was the hardest part of becoming the person that you are now?
Oh my goodness. There is no hard part to it, because, well, it's either there's no hard part or it's all hard part. It's just been one long journey, because as far as music's concerned, it's been the only thing I've wanted to do since I was a little child. I've never wanted to do anything else. You know, I used to drive my friends crazy when I was about 3 because I was constantly banging drums, playing on xylophones, pretending to be a jukebox. I used to sit inside a little cardboard box and pretend to be a jukebox when I was about 3. So it's been what I've always wanted to do. So that when the chance came to get professional, it was a no-brainer, really.
Was there something external that you saw or you felt that made you want to play something, even bang on the walls or whatever?
It's just that I'm always hearing music in my head. You know, being Jamaican, we're brought up with music all around us. You know, my grandfather owned a shop. At the back of the shop, there was dances every weekend. So I was always in and around it. So it just felt like the most natural thing to do. If I tried to do anything else, I would just be bad at it. You know, it would get boring. So I tried to be a teacher once, you know, a science teacher, but an opportunity came up to travel to Canada with a band, and I just dropped the teacher training and went with a band. It's always the only thing I could do. It's difficult. I mean, it's a tough industry. It's a tough industry, but when you feel driven, it just, you know, nothing else matters.
You moved to a few different countries from Jamaica. How did you end up in the UK?
Well, we didn't actually, we came, I mean, my father used to work in America a lot. So we were, you know, I'm not sure whether I would end up in America, but he wanted to go to England and bring the family over. So, you know, we didn't really travel much. We went to England and we pretty much stayed there. So we didn't travel around. The traveling came later when the music was happening. But England was where I was brought up. And, you know, at school, I was always part of the drama class or the music class or the choir. At the church, I was part of the choir. So it's just, like I said, when I discovered that I had a chance to get in the music business, I went for it. I was with several bands. I worked with loads of producers back in the day. I couldn't afford instruments. So in the early days, I used to make instruments out of pots and pans and cardboard boxes with rubber bands to play the bass with. So, you know, it's just to see, looking back, trying to remember when I got interested in this is like trying to remember your first meal. It's just constant.
Yeah.
So
when you were a child in Jamaica, were you playing with pots and pans and
Yeah.
anything that you can find?
everything, and reggae was everything. And, you know, music, my mother was a singer, my dad played a bit guitar. So we were surrounded by music all the time.
Wow, you're so lucky.
I regard myself as being blessed. It hasn't been easy. I mean, it is, like I said, it's a very tough business, you know, to try and make a living out of it. You know, it's many people try, but those who get through, you know, are the lucky few. And they're not always necessarily the best at everything. There's a degree of, you need to work hard. You need to have some talent, but there is a degree of good fortune as well that gets you there.
You have to know something about a lot of things. 'Cause
Yes.
when push comes to shove, you
Yes.
have to know how to do certain things and not
Yeah.
depend on other people.
You know something, that I think was one of the biggest advantages I had, because I know I worked with so many great singers, great writers, great instrumentalists, and many of them got nowhere. I was fortunate enough to have enough skills in certain different areas, you know, that combined. So, that was the thing that got me through, because, in fact, making records is expensive. Back in the day, to book a recording studio was impossible. unless you had big money. It was totally impossible. But luckily, I had a little bit of knowledge of electronics. I could solder, I could wire things up, I could make my own little amplifiers, and I made my own recording devices, very cheap and cheerful. But that helped me.
Were you taking music classes when you were in school?
No, I didn't. Yeah, I'd done a few lessons, but not really, because I just copied ideas from the great songwriters. People like the Bob Marleys, the Earth, Wind and Fire, Stevie Wonder, those kind of people. I took influence from them greatly. So songwriting was one of my biggest pulls. Performing was fun, but songwriting was my real joy.
As a songwriter and composer, what comes first, the lyrics or the music?
Something that's questions asked quite a lot, and it's always different. It's always different. Sometimes it's hard to describe, because you just, like if you imagine, if I said to imagine a picture, imagine a park, you see it in your mind. You can describe it, but sometimes I think music and I hear the notes, I hear the words, and I rush for pen and paper to write it down. So inspiration. It's wonderful.
What's your inspiration? Because you have to have something external or something within you that allows you to do that.
I don't know. It's just there. It's just there. I can't describe it. I mean, it feels obvious, because it's obvious to me. Sometimes when I talk to my children, they get it, because they're the same thing. When I talk to people who are not so, it's like a painter. They look at a canvas and suddenly think, a mountain, and they suddenly draw a mountain. How do you explain it? It's just something like that.
But do you think you have to have some kind of knowledge about music theory in order to be a good songwriter?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I mean, of course, you have to have decent language skills, to rhyme and meter and stuff like that. But when you hear a melody in your head and you walk and then get a guitar and start playing it, of course, it's nice to have some playing skills. I play a bit of guitar. I can play basic chords on the piano. And I can, play some instruments. In fact, most of my records, I played most of the instruments because I couldn't afford to pay session people. So it worked out quite cheap.
So how did the song "What Do I Do" come about?
What do I do? Well, that was, I'd had a couple of hits by then. So I was getting a bit confident, and I could buy better instruments. And strange enough, I don't know, but I do remember one thing about that song. The verses came quite smoothly. I just heard them, I wrote them down. I had a really hard time with the chorus.
Were you having a hard time getting through to someone at that moment?
No, the thing is, I knew what I wanted to say, but I struggled for a very long time. The chorus was, there's 100 versions. How am I going to do if I want to get through? What do I do if I can get through, if I can't get through? I tried 1,000 different versions, and then after a while, the penny dropped. It's obvious. What do I do if I want to get through to you? And then I was freaked out as to how popular it became. I made the record. To me, it's just another record. And I liked it. I didn't get the same effect as I got with Dancing Tight. With Dancing Tight, I somehow knew this was going to be a big hit. And I don't know. I remember when I wrote it, I went. I was telling this story just recently. Just now. The story behind Dancing Tight, which was the first big one, was quite a nice story, because I was still a poor, struggling musician.
How old were you back then?
Oh, but then back then I would have been about 25, because I'd been with the band before, so and so I got some experience. But then I started going out trying to do my own thing, and I was trying to get my own deals. So I wasn't that young, fresh out of school, but I was still a struggling musician, and this was when it became to, the time was actually New Year's Eve, 83, actually, when I started to write Dancing Tight, and which was the one that really opened the doors for me. And the lovely story about that was, it was New Year's Eve, so all my friends were going partying and saying, let's go to the party. And I said, no, I'll stay home and write some songs. And I didn't get good reaction, because they thought, you're so boring. So no one was happy with me. But the strange thing is, at midnight, when I looked at the clock, and I thought everyone's singing and drinking and having a party, I'm sitting here like some sad geezer on my own with a microphone. And I was singing the part of the song that goes, Right now, we can be the greatest dancers around. And I was on my own in my room, headphones on, singing at the top of my voice. And my next door neighbor heard the noise and started banging on the wall, saying, "Shut up, shut up." And I was so upset and then I thought to myself, I thought, if this song is ever a hit, I'm going to buy that house and move them all out. And the song was a hit. And that's exactly what I did. I went next door.
It really happened?
It happened just like that.
You kicked them all out?
And I bought the house next door and moved everyone out. And that became my house.
Oh my gosh, you were totally manifesting.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, that is so
just the way it
awesome.
happened. I know, it was a great story.
That is so awesome. When you moved from Jamaica to the UK, what differences did you see as a child? Because it must have been very different.
Yeah, very, very different. I was about 5.5. First thing, you notice coming from Jamaica and landing in England in winter, you feel the cold for the first time, and you start to experience, different cultures. I mean, it was a bit shell shock. You experience racism for the first time. You've never seen that before. All the kids, you get bullied, and you have to readjust pretty quickly. Luckily, my older brother was he didn't take any nonsense. So when we had trouble, he would jump in and fix it. But it was really a shell shock, and things like having to go to school in a different way, because my mother was a school teacher, so everything was all in-house. We learned it, but going formally to school and lining up with uniforms, it was a bit regimented. I didn't particularly like it. I got used to it. I didn't particularly like it. And many ways, I sort of want to go back home. But obviously after a while, we got used to it, and we made friends, and we adapted the culture.
This was during the 60s, right?
Well, yes, that's right. But I came around in the early 60s, yeah.
So you grew up literally during that time, the British invasion of the 60s.
Yeah.
There were all these bands around
Yeah.
you. So what was that experience like? What was it like growing up in England in the middle of all of that?
I love that. That I did love. I love the music. I mean, to this day, I when I hear some of those songs, from Cilla Black and those like the early Backrack songs that I said one of my favorite writers, I get great memories of those. And then the whole Beatles thing, the whole when we moved house in northwest London, and this house had an old piano, broken down piano. And I was in my element, because just the thought of bashing on, that's when I first started learning to play on my own, teaching myself the chords, that old piano, and playing all those pop songs, all those Beatles songs, all the songs of the day. I learned to play on that piano. That was the first bit of instrument, that I had, after leaving Jamaica, and, with pots and pans. This was the first instrument.
Did you want to be like them, like those bands, like the Beatles, the Stones?
Yes. I just wanted to make music any way, any which way. And the bands, obviously, the thought of becoming as successful as the Beatles, I mean, it was everyone's dream,
I'm sure everyone had that dream, right? Because
Yeah.
they were larger than life
Yeah.
worldwide.
Yeah. The thing is, I mean, also, there's a little bit of innocence, because as a kid, you just want to make music and you want to travel the world and meet people, and it's all fun and games. And that, I like that memory, because that was innocent and that was pure and that was formative. When you actually do it, and thankfully it's worked well, you do see the other side of it as well. Because I remember people saying that the music business is like, 10% music and 90% business. And that part I didn't like. Even though I managed to set up a successful record label back in the day. And I was, it's my label. But I was a reluctant businessman, because I had to learn business things that I find boring, So I just flip back to this is why even the way to promote yourself these days is social media and all that stuff. And I find that a bit boring too, and I find it a bit intrusive. I just want to make the music and let someone else deal with all that nonsense.
It's all about being the creative.
The creative thing is where my passion is, and like I said, I love all kinds of music. I mean, if you saw our record collection, you'd see one minute we're listening to, like I said, maybe Bob Marley or something. Next minute we're listening to Julio Iglesias. Next minute we're listening to the Rolling Stones. It depends on the day. So fortunate, in fact, an interesting thing that I sometimes surprise people when I mention interviews is, although I love all kinds of music, I didn't quite get into punk, right? Although I was offered to be one of the original Sex Pistols.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was, because I went to school with Glenn Matlock, and the bass player. And, he said to me, he's forming a new band, called a Sex Pistols, and he wants a keyboard player, and he invited us along to the rehearsal, and and I went along. I heard the music. I thought, this isn't for me, Glenn.
So had you actually said yes, would you have gone to a different genre of music altogether?
Well, I discovered that punk wasn't for me, and then I was working with them soul music bands, the people making music like the Earth, Wind and Fires, and and that's where my passion was in as far as making music. So that when I mention that to people, they think, how did that work? But it really happened.
It'll be a different Phil
It
Fearon.
would. Oh my! It would have been different.
What were your favorite bands from the 60s, 70s, 80s?
You know something? The 60s, there's, names like the Beatles, names like the Kinks, people like
The Yardbirds?
Yes, and people like the American bands like the Mamas and the Papas and those and the
Dave
Beach
Clark
Boys.
Five.
My God, Dave Clark Five, the harmonies, the Beach Boys, the harmonies, and the Carpenters. Oh my goodness, and America, Bread. Those. When I started my band in the late 70s, those were great influences because we were a harmony band. We'd done a lot of harmonies, and people like American Bread and the Carpenters were big influences on us at that point.
How about the 70s? Because your music was greatly influenced by the late 70s.
Yes, it was. That at that point, a lot of the funk, funkadelic, and a lot of the sort of the Sheiks and those kind of those kinds of styles were really what we were into. We were going to a lot of clubs at that point, so a lot of
And Earth, Wind and Fire, of course.
Of course, my God, to this day, all the stuff still sounds fresh to me. And every time you hear, because I'm into musical colours. I like writing songs, but I like colourful music as well. And to this day, when I hear Earth, Wind and Fire, I hear new things that I didn't hear back then. So they were awesome.
How about Barry White?
Another one. Yeah, love his stuff. From the first time I heard, I'm gonna love you, love you, love you, just a little bit more, I was smitten. And obviously, it was new to me because that big growling voice, background and the strings. That was. I love Barry White.
I'm still smitten to this day. He's my all-time favorite artist.
He absolutely beautiful.
So speaking of Barry White, I read that you had actually formed a band or wanted to be a producer and staying in the background instead of the frontman.
That's
of Galaxy,
true. That's
right?
true. That's exactly true. Because I thought if I was a writer, the idea was to sort of, and to have success was to form a band of pretty white boys who would go out there and, perform the music and take all the photographs and do all the touring, and I'll sit back and do the writing and the production and be hidden from the side.
You wouldn't want to get out there as the front man.
Well,
you would rather sit back.
Yeah, because that way I wouldn't be channeled down any particular road. I can, if I choose to, I can write a sweet ballad one day. I could write something maybe that an orchestra could do another day. I could write something that a pop band can do one day. I can write something that a reggae band can do another day. I have the freedom to write songs anyhow I feel.
In other words, if you had a hit of a certain style,
yes,
for example, like Dancing Tight, would you be typecasted?
Yes,
quote unquote typecasted.
That's part of the reason, and I'm glad that I became the frontman. I've loved it, but the way it went when I sent these demos to the record label, and they said, "We like what you're doing. We're going to sign you up."
Keep on doing that.
They said they said we'll sign you up, and I said to them, "Who are you going to get to perform it?" And they said, "Well, who's the guy on the demo?" I said, "Well, that's me on the demo," and they said, "You're the one." And so I reluctantly had to become, and that's why the first few records went out as Galaxy. didn't have my name on it because I wanted to be anonymous.
So were you a reluctant frontman?
Yes, effectively,
Yeah?
yes.
Because it took you further than you had imagined.
Of course, and it's so funny because the record label thought, okay, you're the front man, and I said I was reluctant front man. They said, what are we going to call you? I said, well, and they try to come up with these cool sounding names for me, like I don't know, Chuck or something real cool. And I said, well, my name's Phil, and they thought you can't go out there. Phil Fearon doesn't sound like much of a star's name, but they couldn't find anything better. So they said, okay, we'll call you Phil Fearon then. And then, strange enough, when people started to get to know me, they said, what's your real name? Because Phil Fearon sounds like a made-up name. I said, no, that's my real name. So that was quite cute.
It sounds like a superstar's name.
You know something? I like the sound of that. I like you.
So you had a funk band in the 70s?
Yes, I mean, like 78, I was with a band called, 78, 79, there was a band called Candidate. We had some hits in the UK. And before that, I was with another band because this is like fresh out of school, just kids trying to make something. A band called High Tension, that they wanted to do more covers, American covers, and I wanted to do original stuff, and so we didn't quite get on that. So I moved on, and then High Tension became a very big hit in the UK. My band became a big hit in the UK. So both bands succeeded, and then I went to do my own solo thing after a while.
During that time in the 70s, of course, there's yacht music. We had those slow songs.
Yeah.
And there's disco, of course. And then you move towards acid jazz or freestyle. Here in the US, they had freestyle. A lot of the instrumentation in your song is kind of like a remnant from the 70s disco.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing some freestyle, a little bit of freestyle because that electronic music came about, right? Yeah. What were your thoughts in terms of songwriting, in terms of composing, like being in the cusp of that time period?
Well, the thing is, my influences are vast. Like my favorite songwriters, like Burt Bacharach, and my favorite band is Earth, Wind & Fire. One of my favorite artists is Bob Marley. One of my favorite individual artists, Stevie Wonder. So the influences came far and wide. So there was no real, I never thought about it. I just did whatever I needed to do to try and get the sound, and I could play, like I said, the basics. But if I needed something a really sort of of a better quality, I'd call in session men who can do a better job than me and say, here's what I want, and they do it. Strange enough, I mean, even on Everybody's Laughing, people don't realize that the featured trumpet player is Tom Brown. It was a pretty classic name out there. So we had some great people to work with, and obviously the more success you had, the more you could bring great people in and then cross fertilize ideas.
Would you say that you had to make use of what you had at that time? Because in hindsight, looking back at that type of music, it's reflective of the music that came from that period.
Absolutely, yes. The influences were great. And the thing is, you said earlier, you did what you did with what you had on that day, and it was crude but effective.
And you got to get your neighbors out of their house.
Yes. And funny enough, the strange thing is, when I got signed to a record label, they put me into some really big, expensive studios, and which is, lovely. But the biggest hits all came from my bedroom with my little home studio. So, we would go to this massive place, super expensive. Then I go home, it's my bedroom studio and write something that was a bigger hit than anything else. So, it worked for me.
Doesn't matter where you are. You could be at the beach or in the mountains.
That doesn't matter where you are. It's the inspiration. I mean, many acts and artists I knew would make a demo, take it to a record label, and the record would say, love it, and they'd go and make the record properly, and then go back to the demo because it had the feel.
Would you say it's the rawness of that moment?
Yeah.
Whenever it hits you, and you don't know when it will hit you.
Definitely for me, it's a spontaneous moment you can't put into words. And I'm very grateful about that. I regard that as a gift that I'm very, very thankful for.
Do you ever think that you would make it that big and have chart-topping hits?
You know something? Every artist wants it. We all desire it, but when it comes, it can be overwhelming. It can. Luckily for me, I had a little taste of that live because with the band we had quite a couple of big hits, so I had a taste of how it works. But it also was a lesson in what not to do, because we done all this fantastic. We done TV shows, we drove around in limousines, and we weren't making very much of a living. It was just a big show. It wasn't really happening. And there are a lot of, the music industry is full of sharks as well, you know. So we met a lot of bad players as well. So by the time I got around to do my own thing, because, you know, it was a bit of a struggle, I learned a lot of what not to do by then. So, you know, and that you can't put into words. It's just an experience thing. So I developed, if you like, a barometer of where to be and how to act to make things more successful.
Now that you're making a comeback to some stages, some small ones, some big ones, in terms of that barometer, where do you see yourself?
You know, I don't think too much about it because, you know, the 80s, you know, was great when it was there, and then no one anticipated how much of a resurgence you're going to come later. No one quite knows. It all happens. I mean, the amount of shows I'm doing now, it's, you know, I'm just grateful. I mean, working with people like, I've been supporting Shalimar for some of their shows, and I mean, I'm one of their biggest fans ever. You know, I opened for Alexander O'Neill for one of his shows. I've been working with some great people. So when it comes in, I'm still a bit like an excited kid. When I get told, you know, do you want to work with Shalimar? You know, you got to stop me from giggling. I'm really excited, and luckily, I haven't lost the excitement. I'm glad to say.
That is so awesome. There's this resurgence of old music from the 60s, music from the 70s. You see people like John Legend and Bruno Mars with an old sound.
Yes.
You know, it's that old soul sound from the 60s that they have. And people are clamoring for that kind of sound. And do you think there's going to be more of that? Are people just really hungry for that stuff again?
Yes. I'm glad of it. I mean, some of the, you mentioned Bruno Mars. I mean, some of the stuff he's done, like my children are great fans of Bruno Mars, and we sit there listening to some of the tracks thinking, it's got that old feel, modernized, new modern production, performed by an awesome performer. And he's found a great, there are a lot of new artists that have found a modern take on the old style, which has proven that the old style still got a lot going for it, and a lot of younger artists are hankering for that style, and which works for me because, you know, that's my upbringing.
And this is stuff that we love.
Yes,
right?
Glad to hear. I'm glad to hear it.
Do you think, considering what you've experienced coming from Jamaica, being born in a musical family, like having that music in your backyard every day, almost every day, right, and moving to England and becoming that musician, songwriter that you are now, with several hits under your name, do you think you've lived your purpose?
Well, I'm living my purpose because I'm so grateful that I'm as excited now as I was back then. You know, the better thing is that you've achieved something, so you don't feel you're still clambering, trying to get there, and you don't have the financial pressure that you would back in the day where you couldn't afford to buy a guitar or couldn't afford to buy the strings. At least you're working now, and it's become your greatest hobby is your living. So it's win-win, and I'm forever grateful.
What would your advice be? Because you mentioned your greatest hobby, you were just doing this stuff that you love, and you ended up making something out of it. And kicking your neighbors out, buying their house. But what would your advice be for people out there who still have that kind of dream and who are struggling to find their place in the music industry or doing the things that they love?
Well, that's a big thing with me, giving advice, because I remember when I was struggling, when I was really struggling, and when my dad said to me, you know, you got a few exams from school, they won't last forever. You know, you make a decision, you're going to get a proper job or become a musician. And I said, I'm going to become a musician or a tramp. There's no in between. I said one or the other. But if I remember making, this is an interesting one. I remember making a kind of promise to the universe. I remember this vividly, that it was such a struggle to get through. I said that if I ever did get through properly, I will make it my mission to help anybody and anybody who needs help to get through. And I've stuck to that. And many people have come to me for advice and help, and I've helped them on their way, whether it's studio advice, sometimes financial advice if they need some studio time. But one of the strangest bits of advice I give people when they ask how to get in the business, my first advice is don't. Do something else. Get yourself a proper job. Do not go for music. However, if you are absolutely brutally convicted, then go for it. Otherwise, don't bother, because it will take all of your energy, all of the time to make it. So if you can do it halfway and piecemeal, do something else.
You have to be all in it.
All in or forget it. It takes all of you, all of the time to stand a chance. Because remember, you're up against people who will be putting all of themselves in all the time. So don't bother unless you're prepared to really go for it.
Thank you so much for all of your wisdom. I'm so glad to meet you. And
Likewise.
Thank you for being here tonight. And I wish you all the best in your performances.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much. And if people were wondering, if they want to find out information about you and your hits and all of your current projects, where can they find you?
People can find me. They can find my fan page. They can get in touch if they want to.
Everybody, if you want to find information about Phil Fearon, go to his Facebook fan page. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
My pleasure.
And to those of you watching, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we'll see you in the next episode of Chat with Nick. Bye.
Bye.
This episode is brought to you by Tang and Java. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss out.